Hello, everyone. This is Rose. Today's topic from the Book of Life is there is a thin line between love and hate. Why do men have to learn the hard way after pushing the envelope? Let's take a look at this short story from the Book of Life. Mr. Johnny Red Walker has been married for 35 years to his beautiful wife, Cora. They married when Johnny Red was 25 and Cora was 20. They have two children, a son, Johnny Red Jr., who is 30 years of age, and a daughter, Corinne, who is 28 years of age. Everyone calls Johnny Red Jr. JR for short. JR is single. He works as a fitness trainer during the day. Corinne is engaged to her 2-year-old daughter's father. She works as a nurse. Because Mr. Walker did not want his wife to work outside of the home when they were married, he built a nightclub from the ground up when he was only 25, shortly after marrying Cora. Mr. Walker continued to work his daytime job as a postal inspector after opening up his nightclub. That's what I call a hard-working man. Wanted to make sure his wife was there and available for his kids. So he worked 2 jobs. Mr. Walker continued, to just be faithful and dedicated to his daytime job. To this day, at the age of 60, Mr. Walker still works his daytime job. Many well-known jazz singers were originally featured and discovered in Mr. Walker's nightclub. The club hours of operation during the time he first opened up his club was 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. on Thursdays, 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. on Fridays, and 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. on Saturdays. He will also open his club occasionally on Sundays from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. So Mr. Walker didn't have his club open every day, but yet he was out and about like he was going to his club every day. So although the club, as stated, was only open 4 days a week, Mr. Walker would go out every evening dressed in a 3-piece suit with shiny gator shoes and a fedora hat. He would tell his wife Cora that he was working. For years, Mr. Walker would come home around 5 a.m. looking fresh and rested. Cora has to be a very good woman and knew her place in the home as being a mother and a wife by a provider, because she did not question him. She allowed her husband to do what he needed to do. Because Mrs. Walker was known for putting the chain on the door. See, when you feel like you're a single woman, or you're home alone, your husband is out, you want to secure your home. You don't have your husband there. So the only way to protect you and your kid, Mrs. Walker got in the habit of putting that chain on the door. No one is coming in here. So she did that. And because she was known for doing that, Mr. Walker didn't question it because he understood that that was her security blanket. So Mr. Walker would have to knock on the door each time he arrived home at 5 a.m. Mrs. Walker routinely, in her sweet and low voice, would ask, "Who is it?" "It's me, baby, Johnny." Mrs. Walker would open the door and ask her husband. Now remember, this is 5 o'clock in the morning. She would open the door and ask her husband, "Are you hungry? Are you hungry, honey? Did you eat?" Upon Mr. Walker answer, "No," she would reply, "Let me hang up your coat. Pass me your hat." All the while she is smiling, never once raising her voice. Mrs. Walker would fix her husband a cup of coffee as he changes his clothes before heading to his day job at the post office. The club began to decline during the start of the rap era. The club no longer featured jazz artists singing live. Occasionally, a live band would play, but it soon faded as well and was replaced with music from an online playlist streaming over loudspeakers. Because the club was in threat of closure, JR took over as part owner. JR hired an interior decorator to update the decor. He followed the same concept for the club as his father. He would love and, he invited new singers and rappers to showcase their skills in the club. He added 3 VIP areas. Also for group parties, he added 2 private rooms with a window view of the stage. JR opened the bar area of the club every day, not 4 days a week, but every day at 3 p.m. Only the bar area was open at 3 p.m., except on Sundays when the club was closed. The drinks were discounted from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Sounds like happy hour to me. So he invited people to come in to unwind after a long day work from 3 to 7 with discounted drinks. The club closed at 2 a.m. each day it was open. So that's every day of the week except on Sundays. The club owner, Ms. JR, would hire students from the local culinary school to prepare the finger foods listed on the menu. So he was a smart business person. He knew he can get upcoming culinary chefs that was in school to showcase and prepare meals, finger foods, for the people who came to the club. The club once again became a very lucrative business for the Walkers. It was in the hands of young JR, and he brought it back from being a place of where no one, came anymore to a place that was up and running and popping. Although the club was attracting a younger crowd of people between the ages of 21 and 35, Mr. Walker would dress up in his 3-piece suit, his fedora hat, and shiny gator shoes every night. After a month of going to the club and his son JR watching him sit at the bar and flirt with women, JR decided that it was time to pull his dad aside and have a little heart-to-heart talk with him. This ain't working, Dad. He said, "Hey, Dad, I got this. There's no need for you to come to the club every evening because you are part owner. We have enough staff and a floor manager who is doing an outstanding job. Plus, I'm here, Dad, to oversee everything. It's time for you to sit back and just enjoy the fruit of the seed you planted, Dad. Sit back and enjoy. You're still working your daytime job. Let me handle this. I got this." So of course, Mr. Walker, he said, "I hear you, son, but I like to keep myself busy. How about if I come in a couple of nights each week just to see how things are going?" JR, feeling, sad that he had said what he said to his dad. He understand. So he said, "Okay, Dad, I think that is a good idea." Mr. Walker made a phone call before heading out the door. A few months went past when JR suddenly realized he has not seen his dad in the club. He made a mental note to call and check on his dad. He felt bad and he wanted to make sure that he did not hurt his dad's feelings when he told him that his presence was no longer needed in the club, that he got it. So he felt a little bad because he knew his dad had been doing that for years, working during the day and running the club at night, and it was hard for him to change. So he wanted him to feel like he was still important. So he felt bad. Said, "Okay, I need to check in on Dad." A lady wearing a sexy red jumpsuit asked to speak to the owner or the manager. One of the bottle girls escorted the lady to JR. "JR, someone is asking to speak with you." The bottle girl introduced JR to the lady as the owner of the club. JR shakes the lady's hand before asking her, "How can I help you?" The lady began to say, "I was sitting at the bar when someone approached me on my right and offered to buy me a drink. I only turned for a brief moment to thank the person and to let him know I am waiting for someone. As I turned back around, I noticed someone had pickpocketed my purse I had on my left shoulder, taking my wallet. I am so sorry to hear this. I can assure you this is the first incident of theft reported since reopening the club. Let me escort you to our security covering the cameras. Hopefully the theft is on camera so we can submit a copy of the tape to the police." JR asked the lady to follow him to the security room where the cameras are located. As they enter into the room, JR hears one security guard saying to the other security guard, "The owner's old man, Mr. Walker, comes up in here every evening around 6 p.m., then leaves with the same lady. They are in and out within 2 minutes. I wonder if boss man know that his dad is meeting the same lady at the club every night." JR walks up behind the two security guards as they was talking. He clears his throat to let them know he was behind them. He says to them both, "We will discuss that later. In the meantime, I need you both to assist this young lady. Someone pickpocketed her purse as she was distracted by another guest. Can you check the cameras so that a police report can be filed? Also, if you all spot the pickpocketer in the club, please detain him in the back until the police arrive. Okay, boss. JR turns to the lady. Again, I am sorry this happened in my club. You are in good hands. Hopefully we can find out who did this. As JR walks out the security room, he asks the guards to make sure this young lady receive a complimentary drink card dated for any future date of her choice. The card would allow her to have unlimited amounts of drinks for that day that she chose. So, as the club was closing up for the evening, JR asked the security guard to show him the tape of his father coming into the club each evening and the moment he leaves with the same lady. JR, him and the security guards was in the security room going through tapes for each day for the past couple of weeks. JR noticed it's the same woman. In his mind, he go, this lady looks familiar. I recognize the lady. I recognize her as a friend of the family who used to come to gatherings at our home, our family home. Then he remembered she would sometimes bring her son with her, who is the same age as JR. JR continued to think, and he thought to himself, he said he often wondered why she stopped attending events at their home. It was like she was always there, and then suddenly she's not there any longer. And he often wondered what happened to her, but he was young, so he didn't question his parents. He liked hanging out with her son. He thought about that. I always liked hanging out with her son when they used to visit. But he had no way of getting in touch with him because he was young. They was just kids. So JR was trying to remember the lady name. He could remember her son's face. He could remember the lady, but he just could not remember the lady name. So as he was driving home for the evening, it finally came to him. He's like, oh yeah. As he thought to himself, her name is Miss Pat. That's Miss Pat. And her son's name is Philip. How could I forget? How could I forget her name is Miss Pat. Now I remember. And Philip, that was his name. So JR began to think to himself, I wonder how Philip is doing. Dad must be helping her with something. That's strange. Why didn't he say something? I could have been of assistance as well. Plus, it would have been good to hear what Philip has been up to lately. Man, thought JR, it has been a minute. I think the last time I saw Miss Pat and Philip, it had to be about 20 years ago, because Philip and I was around 10 years old. Wow, that's something. Why Dad didn't say nothing? JR was curious. He was so curious. So the next day, JR decided to go over to his parents' home that morning to find out what is going on with Miss Pat. Hey, Mom, where's Dad? Hi, JR. Your dad is out and about. He never tells me where he's going. I'm sure he will return before it's time to open the club tonight. Mom, how is Miss Pat and her son Philip doing? JR Mom had a surprised, startled look on her face. She was wondering, why are you asking me about Miss Pat and her son? JR said, well, I'm just being nosy, Mom. Trying to find out what is it that you and Dad is helping her with. What gave you the impression, son, that we are helping her? Well, she came into the club. Matter of fact, she comes into the club every evening around the same time and leaves with Dad. JR Mom Cora stared in space, in silence, for a brief moment before speaking. She was speechless. She couldn't believe that this lady, who was a part of their life, who no longer is a part of their life, is still coming around. She just didn't understand what was going on. Well, son, I will be leaving that explanation to your father. Apparently, he is the one helping her. JR suddenly realized he opens up a can of worms that his mother knew nothing about. Sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to ignite a fire to something I'm sure is innocent in nature. It's okay, son. All is good on my end. JR left his parents' home with an uncomfortable feeling. He felt embarrassed that he had brought that to the forefront. He didn't know how to handle it. He didn't know how to comfort his mom. He didn't know what to say because he didn't want to dig a ditch deeper than what it was already dig. He didn't want to say anything else, so he just left his parents' home, but he felt very uncomfortable. He had a very uncomfortable feeling. He wasn't sure if he should talk to his dad about the conversation he had with his mom, or if he should just leave it alone. JR decided, well, let me observe Dad and Miss Pat at the club before jumping to any conclusions. I don't want to do the same thing to Dad that I did to Mom. Go in and ask questions and don't know what's going on. Let me observe and get a feel of what's going on. So that evening, he watched from a distance as his father comes into the club, walks up to Miss Pat, greets her with a hug, takes her by the hand as they walk out the club together, grinning from ear to ear. JR concluded no explanation was needed from his dad. He had already perceived, based off of what he saw from his dad and what he heard from his mom, what the answer was. So he knew it was time for him to stay out of grown folks' business and leave it alone. As usual, Mr. Johnny arrives home at 5 a.m. in the morning, knocking on the door. Mrs. Walker routinely, in her sweet and low voice, asks, "Who is it?" "It's me, baby, Johnny." Mrs. Walker opened up the door and asked her husband, "Are you hungry? Are you hungry, honey? Did you eat?" Upon Mr. Walker answering no, she replied, "Let me hang up your coat. Pass me your hat." All the while she is smiling, never once raising her voice. Mrs. Walker fixed her husband a cup of coffee as he changed his clothes. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. Mr. Walker didn't give it a single thought until the sweetest woman in the world became the meanest woman in the world. He made her that way. Now that he is laid up in the hospital, bandaged from feet to head, he has a message for his son when he arrives at the hospital. He says, "Son, look at your dad. See me, but don't be like me. Here I am in the hospital, bandaged from feet to head, in a state of shock because I am an inch from being dead. I didn't think your mama would do something like this to me. I didn't think she had the nerve. But here I am. I guess actions speak louder than words." JR looked at his dad. He had nothing to say other than lesson learned. So tell me, do you think it is a thin line between love and hate? If you do, in the comments section, just put hashtag thin line. That's it. You only have to write hashtag thin line. Click the thumbs up and the subscribe button to receive notifications of more articles from the Book of Life. Be blessed. Be safe. Peace, people. Until the next story.